After losing everything to betrayal, she escapes, only to fall for a millionaire CEO stranger. Then she gave him triplets. In the world of high-stakes finance, Nora Jensen had built a reputation as brilliant but ruthless, the woman who never missed market signals and never let emotions cloud her judgment. At 32, she'd transformed from small-town scholarship student to managing director at Prescott Capital, controlling portfolios worth billions while building her own considerable fortune. Tonight should have been triumphant. The Blackstone acquisition she'd orchestrated against fierce opposition had finally closed, adding another victory to her flawless record. Instead, she stood frozen in the doorway of her penthouse suite at the Peninsula Tokyo, watching her fiancé. Sebastian thrust aggressively into her executive assistant Madeline on the custom Italian sofa Nora had waited 6 months to receive. They hadn't noticed her yet. Sebastian's back was to the door, his tailored shirt still on but unbuttoned, his pants around his ankles. Madeline's legs were wrapped around his waist, her head thrown back in theatrical pleasure, moaning loudly enough to cover the sound of Nora's keycard and quiet gasp. "Harder," Madeline urged. "She won't be back until tomorrow. We have all night." Sebastian complied, his rhythm increasing. "God, you feel so much better than her. She's always too busy thinking about work to actually let go." The coldness that settled in Nora's chest wasn't shock or even heartbreak. It was something worse, recognition. She'd suspected for months, but had dismissed her intuition as paranoia. The canceled dinner dates, the assistant who suddenly needed to work late whenever Sebastian was in town, the mysterious charges on the company accounts that didn't quite match reported expenses. She stepped fully into the room and cleared her throat. Their reactions told separate stories. Madeline's eyes widened in genuine alarm. Sebastian's expression cycled through surprise, embarrassment, and finally landed on something resembling irritation at being interrupted. "You're back early," he said, as if commenting on unexpected rain. Nora set her briefcase down with deliberate care. Clearly, Sebastian disentangled himself from Madeline, who scrambled to cover herself with a throw pillow. Neither spoke as Nora walked to the bar and poured herself 3 fingers of Macallan 25. "How long?" she asked, her voice steady. "Nora, this isn't what—" Madeline began. 8 months, Sebastian cut in, already tucking his shirt back in. "Though if we're being honest, things between us haven't been right for longer." 8 months. Nora swirled the amber liquid in her glass. "Interesting timeline, considering we got engaged 6 months ago." Sebastian shrugged, a gesture so casual it felt like another betrayal. "The engagement was practical, good for both our careers. Your clients love stability and my family expected it." "And the accounts?" Nora asked, turning to Madeline, who at least had the decency to look ashamed. "How much have you taken?" The silence confirmed her suspicions. "I had access to the forensic accounting report before I flew back," Nora continued. 4.6 million from various discretionary funds over the past year, creative bookkeeping. I was actually impressed by the sophistication." Sebastian straightened his tie, recovering his composure. "The firm pays you obscenely well while I manage the Asia relationships that bring in half your clients. Consider it fair compensation." Nora laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "I've already called the Tokyo police. They'll be here in approximately 10 minutes. I suggest you use that time to put on pants and consider your legal strategy." Sebastian's face darkened. "You wouldn't dare. Think about the scandal, the damage to your reputation. The board will force you out rather than weather that publicity." "Perhaps." Nora sipped her scotch. "But you'll still go to prison." What followed was chaos. Sebastian's threats, Madeline's tearful explanations, the arrival of hotel security followed by local police. Statements were given. Preliminary charges filed. By dawn, Nora sat alone in the suite, staring at Tokyo's skyline as it shifted from darkness to brilliant morning light. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. The board chairman, PR team, legal counsel, all demanding immediate damage control. The story had already leaked. Financial Twitter was ablaze. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing with the same efficiency she'd used to build it. By afternoon, the board had placed her on temporary leave pending an investigation into her judgment and oversight. By evening, her key clients had quietly shifted their portfolios to other managers. By midnight, alone on the 14-hour flight back to New York, Nora Jensen, who had built a reputation on never missing signals, finally allowed herself to acknowledge that she'd missed the most important ones. 3 months later, Nora sat at a weathered wooden table in a small cafe on Spain's Costa Brava, her laptop open to financial news she no longer had any stake in. The scandal had been even more devastating than anticipated. Sebastian had connections the board couldn't ignore, and Madeline had strategically shared emails suggesting Nora had been aware of the financial improprieties. Both falsehoods, but damaging enough. She'd resigned rather than be fired, accepted a settlement that was generous but far less than she'd earned, and disappeared before the press could turn her into that most pitiable of characters, a powerful woman undone by romantic blindness. The small inheritance from her grandmother had purchased this stone cottage overlooking the Mediterranean. Her days now followed a simple pattern: morning swims in the sea, afternoons reading or walking the rocky coastline, evenings watching the sunset with local wine and whatever the fisherman had caught that day. After years of 18-hour workdays, the emptiness felt both liberating and terrifying. Another coffee? The voice, deep and accented, pulled her from her thoughts. The cafe owner, Damien, stood beside her table. Mid-40s, with sun-weathered skin and intense dark eyes, he'd been a constant presence since her arrival, respecting her obvious desire for solitude while ensuring she never felt entirely alone. "Thank you." She closed her laptop as he placed the fresh espresso before her. "Bad news?" he asked, nodding toward the computer. "Old news," she corrected. "I'm just monitoring the aftermath." He nodded, understanding without requiring details. Sometimes watching the fire we escaped keeps us from seeing the beach before us. The observation, simple yet profound, caught her off guard. Are all cafe owners in Spain so philosophical? His laugh revealed a slight dimple in his right cheek. Only the ones who used to be something else entirely. Before she could ask what he meant, a group of tourists entered, demanding his attention. Nora sipped her espresso, watching as he moved efficiently behind the counter, conversing easily in Spanish, English, and what sounded like fluent German. There was something about his movements, precise, economical, entirely present, that suggested training beyond hospitality. That evening, returning from her sunset walk, Nora found Damien sitting on the low stone wall outside her cottage. "This is unexpected," she said, stopping several feet away. He stood, hands visible at his sides as if recognizing her wariness. "I apologize for the intrusion. You left this at the cafe." He held out her credit card. "Thank you." She took it, careful not to let their fingers touch. "You could have kept it until tomorrow." "I could have," he agreed. "But then you might have worried about it all night." The consideration surprised her. Sebastian would have scoffed at such concern over something so easily replaced. "Would you like to come in?" The invitation surprised her as much as him. Her cottage was sparsely furnished. A battered sofa, a small dining table, shelves filled with books she'd purchased from the English bookstore in Barcelona. No photos, no mementos, nothing to connect her to the life she'd left behind. "Wine?" she offered, suddenly self-conscious about the simplicity surrounding her. "Please." She poured 2 glasses of local red, rich and earthy. When she handed him his glass, their fingers brushed briefly. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her body, a sensation she hadn't experienced in longer than she cared to admit. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "Is that what this is?" His gaze met hers directly. "That depends entirely on you, Nora." The sound of her name in his mouth felt intimate, as though he touched her again. "You know who I am." It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "I recognized you the day you arrived. Your face was on the financial pages for weeks." She stiffened. "And you've been watching me since then?" "Not watching," he corrected gently. "Seeing. There's a difference. And what have you seen?" He considered before answering. A woman healing, slowly finding her way back to herself. The accuracy of his assessment made her uncomfortable. "You've deduced all this from my coffee orders? From the way you've gradually started to look at the sea instead of your computer? From how you began nodding to the other regulars last month? From the books you carry, first financial texts, then novels, now poetry?" His observations were so precise that Nora felt exposed in a way financial scrutiny had never managed. "Why are you really here, Damien?" He set down his glass. "Because 3 months is long enough to grieve what was lost, because I've watched you choose isolation as protection, and because sometimes the universe places people in our path precisely when we need them." That's remarkably presumptuous, but she didn't ask him to leave. Perhaps his eyes held hers, or perhaps it's simply honest. The tension between them shifted into something electric. Nora couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so aware of another person's physical presence, the breadth of his shoulders, The strong hands that had served her coffee countless times, the mouth that now formed words that seemed to reach inside her. "I should go," he said, finishing his wine. "Thank you for the hospitality." She walked him to the door, confused by her reluctance to see him leave. At the threshold, he turned. "There's a cove beyond the point," he said. "Few tourists know about it. The swimming is exceptional at sunrise." He paused. "I go every morning." The invitation hung between them, undemanding yet clear. "Good night, Nora." She watched him walk down the path, his silhouette disappearing into the gathering darkness. For the first time in months, she felt something beyond numbness or regret, a flutter of anticipation, dangerous and alive. Dawn found her standing at the edge of the hidden cove, watching as Damien's powerful form cut through the crystalline water. She'd spent a restless night, replaying their conversation, questioning her impulse to meet him. Yet here she was, drawn by something she couldn't articulate. He spotted her and swam to shore, emerging from the water with unself-conscious grace. Water streamed down his torso, defining muscles honed by more than casual exercise. "You came," he said simply. "I was curious about the swimming." His smile suggested he heard the evasion but wouldn't challenge it. "The water is perfect." Nora hesitated only briefly before removing her cover-up, revealing the simple black swimsuit beneath. She felt his gaze but found none of the objectification she'd grown accustomed to in her previous life, only appreciation and something warmer, more complex. The water shocked her system, its cold embrace washing away her remaining reservations. They swam side by side, matching each other's pace without competition, occasionally pausing to float and watch the sky transform from lavender to brilliant blue. "Why a cafe?" she asked later as they sat on sun-warmed rocks, their shoulders nearly touching. "You're clearly trained for something else." He laughed. "What gave me away? The way you move, the way you observe everything without seeming to. The languages, very perceptive." He turned to face her. "I was private security, high-level corporate protection, then diplomatic service. Military background?" He nodded. "Spanish Special Forces initially." The revelation aligned with her observations, but raised new questions. "And now you serve coffee to tourists?" "Now I live exactly as I choose," he corrected. "After seeing the worst humanity offers, I decided to surround myself with simple pleasures instead." The sentiment resonated more deeply than Nora wanted to admit. "And the cafe allows that?" "The cafe, the sea, this coast." His hand found hers on the rock, his touch gentle but definitive. The freedom to follow genuine connections when they appear. The heat of his palm against hers sent awareness spiraling through her body. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been touched with such clear intent yet without demand. "I should get back," she said, though she made no move to withdraw her hand. "Of course." He released her but held her gaze. "Tomorrow?" The question encompassed more than the morning swim. They both knew it. "Tomorrow," she agreed. 7 days passed in similar fashion. Morning swims that grew longer, conversations that delved deeper, physical awareness that intensified with each brush of hands, each accidental touch. Nora found herself sharing stories she'd never told anyone, about her childhood in rural Minnesota, her mother's early death, the scholarship that had been her escape, her ruthless climb through a system designed to exclude women like her. In turn, Damien revealed fragments of his own past, missions that had taken him to conflict zones, the incident in Damascus that had nearly killed him, his decision to walk away from lucrative security contracts to reclaim his humanity. On the 8th morning, rain kept them from their swim. Instead, they sheltered in her cottage, listening to the storm lash against the windows while drinking coffee laced with brandy. "I've never told anyone about Sebastian and Madeline," she admitted, curled in the corner of her sofa. Not the full story. Damien sat across from her, giving her space to speak. "I'm listening." The story poured from her, not just the betrayal and theft, but the subtle erosion of her confidence that had preceded it, the manipulation so gradual she hadn't recognized it until everything collapsed. The worst part wasn't finding them together, she concluded. It was realizing I'd ignored my own instincts for so long. I built a career on trusting my judgment, then suspended it completely for someone who never deserved my trust. "We all have blind spots when it comes to those we love," Damien said quietly. "I don't think I loved him," Nora admitted. "I loved the idea of us, power couple, complementary skills, aligned ambitions. I'd constructed this narrative about partnership without noticing we were actually competitors." Thunder crashed outside, momentarily drowning the patter of rain. "And now?" Damien asked. What do you want now? The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had explicitly named. Nora found herself moving across the sofa until their knees touched. I want to trust myself again, she whispered. To know that what I'm feeling is real and not another construction. His hand rose to cup her cheek, thumb tracing her lower lip. What are you feeling, Nora? The electricity that had been building between them for days intensified, charging the air around them. Alive, she breathed. For the first time in months, completely alive. His kiss was nothing like she'd imagined, not tentative, not aggressive, but deeply present, as if the entire universe had contracted to this single point of connection. She felt herself responding instantly, years of careful control dissolving beneath the heat of his mouth, the gentle pressure of his hands as they framed her face. When they separated, both breathing heavily, his eyes searched hers. Are you certain? The question, so unlike Sebastian's entitled assumptions, crystallized everything she'd been feeling since they'd met. This man saw her completely, and still wanted her, not as an accessory to his ambitions or a conquest to display, but as herself. Yes, she said, taking his hand and standing. Yes. She led him to her bedroom, sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains despite the rain, casting the simple white space in diffuse gold. Standing before him, Nora began to unbutton her shirt, her fingers steady despite the magnitude of what they were choosing. Damien watched, his gaze intense but patient. When her shirt fell open, revealing a simple cotton bra beneath, his breath caught audibly. You're beautiful, he said, voice rough. She stepped toward him, guiding his hands to her waist. Touch me. His fingers splayed across her ribs, thumbs brushing the undersides of her breasts through thin fabric. The gentleness of his exploration contrasted with the obvious restraint in his posture, creating a tension that heightened every sensation. Nora worked at the buttons of his shirt, revealing the chest she'd glimpsed during their swims, broad, tanned, marked with scars that told stories she wanted to learn. When she pressed her lips to a jagged line near his collarbone, he shuddered. Nora, he breathed, a prayer and warning combined. They undressed each other slowly, each newly revealed expanse of skin explored with hands and mouths. When they finally lay together on her bed, limbs intertwined, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only this, his weight above her, the heat of his skin against hers, the exquisite tension building between her thighs. Hello, my beautiful, wonderful, and amazing family. If you're new to our channel Love and Twilights with Mr. Phillips, this passionate romance represents exactly the kind of emotionally rich, sensually vibrant storytelling we specialize in. Hit that subscribe button right now to join our family of romance enthusiasts who appreciate stories that explore both the heart and the more intimate aspects of human connection. Take a moment to hit that subscribe button now as we begin in passion. Thank you. Now let's continue. His mouth traced a path from her throat to her breasts, tongue circling each nipple until she arched against him, seeking more. When his hand slipped between her legs, finding her already slick with desire, her gasp filled the room. Is this what you want? He murmured against her skin. More, she demanded, guiding his fingers deeper. He complied, watching her face as he touched her, learning her responses with the same focused attention he brought to everything. When he replaced his hand with his mouth, Nora felt herself spiraling toward release with shocking speed. Wait, she gasped, pulling him up to kiss him deeply, tasting herself on his tongue. Together, she guided him inside her, both groaning at the exquisite friction as he filled her completely. They moved together, finding a rhythm that built steadily, her legs wrapped around his waist, his mouth never leaving hers for long. Look at me, he whispered, as she felt herself approaching the edge. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze as pleasure crested and broke through her in waves. The vulnerability of being seen so completely at such a moment would have terrified her before. Now, it only intensified her release, triggering his own as he shuddered above her. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the diminishing rain. Damien's fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, occasionally pressing gently into knots of tension she hadn't realized she carried. Stay, she said, the word emerging before she could analyze its implications. For how long? He asked, his voice rumbling against her ear where it rested on his chest. The question contained multitudes. Stay the night? Stay the week? Stay in her life? Nora, who had planned portfolios worth billions with meticulous precision, found herself embracing uncertainty for the first time. Let's start with today, she said, raising herself on one elbow to look at him, and see what tomorrow brings. His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that made her heart expand painfully. I can work with that. The rain stopped, sunlight strengthening through the windows, bathing them in golden light. Outside her cottage, the Mediterranean stretched endlessly blue, a reminder of possibilities neither had anticipated before a forgotten credit card provided the perfect excuse for new beginnings. Before we continue with this beautiful story, please take a moment to share this video with someone who appreciates passionate storytelling that goes beyond surface-level romance to explore genuine emotional depth. By spreading these stories, you're helping build our community of like-minded individuals who believe that the most compelling romances are those that transform us from the inside out. Days melted into one another after that first morning. Their routine expanded beyond dawn swims to include lazy breakfasts on her terrace, afternoons where Damien would close the cafe early to take her to hidden coves, accessible only by boat, and nights where their bodies explored the language they were creating together, a vocabulary of touch, taste, and whispered revelations. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Damien whispered against her neck one evening, his weight a comforting pressure above her, still joined after bringing her to release twice already. Nora ran her fingers through his hair, damp with exertion. "I never wanted any of it," she admitted. "The corner office, the awards, the recognition. They were just proof." "Proof of what?" He shifted to look into her eyes, still intimately connected. "That I wasn't invisible. That I couldn't be dismissed." She felt him hardening again inside her and rocked gently against him, drawing a sharp intake of breath. "My father used to say women like me should know their place. Every promotion was a knife in that ideology." Damien began moving slowly, deliberately. "And now?" The friction rekindled her desire, building toward another peak. "Now I'm finding a different kind of visibility," she gasped as he reached between them, his thumb circling her most sensitive spot. "Being seen by someone who actually looks." They came together this time, her body clenching around him as he groaned her name against her shoulder, his release triggering aftershocks of pleasure that left her trembling in his arms. Later, as moonlight filtered through the curtains, she asked her own question. "The scar on your back, the long one, you haven't told me that story." His body tensed slightly before relaxing with deliberate control. "Beirut, 5 years ago, an extraction went wrong." "Who were you extracting?" He was silent long enough that she thought he might not answer. "A banker with information about terrorist financing. Someone not unlike you, actually, brilliant with numbers, caught in something bigger than they realized." "Did they survive?" "Yes." His fingers traced abstract patterns on her hip. "But 2 of my team didn't." Nora processed this information, trying to reconcile the gentle lover beside her with a man who had operated in shadows violent enough to leave such marks. "Do you miss it? The adrenaline? The purpose?" His laugh held no humor. "I miss the clarity. In that world, threats are identifiable, objectives clear. Out here," he gestured toward the window, "ambiguity reigns. People smile while concealing knives. Like Sebastian and Madeline," she murmured. "Like many people who navigate power rather than principle." He pulled her closer. "But I don't miss the cost. Every operation left me hollower, less human." Nora kissed the scar that ran across his collarbone, then the one at his shoulder, working her way down to the puckered bullet wound near his ribs. "You seem entirely human to me," she whispered, continuing her downward exploration until she took him in her mouth, drawing a strangled sound of pleasure from deep in his chest. His hands tangled in her hair, not directing but connecting, maintaining contact as she brought him to the edge with deliberate skill. When he tugged gently in warning, she ignored it, taking him deeper until he shuddered with release, her name a broken prayer on his lips. They fell asleep tangled together, her head on his chest, his arm protectively around her shoulders, 2 people finding unexpected shelter in each other's damaged places. 2 weeks into their affair, though that word seemed inadequate for what was developing between them, Nora sat at her usual table at Damien's cafe, her laptop open for the first time in days. She'd been avoiding the financial news, unwilling to reopen wounds still healing, but an email from her former attorney had arrived that morning, requiring attention. The settlement with Prescott Capital had included a strict non-disclosure agreement. In exchange for not pressing criminal charges against Sebastian and the firm covering the stolen funds, Nora had agreed never to discuss the circumstances of her departure. The arrangement had protected her reputation from the worst speculation, but left her unable to defend herself against the whispers that she'd had some complicity in the financial improprieties. The email detailed a new development. Sebastian had been named CEO of Prescott's Asia division, a promotion positioning him to eventually take the global helm. The announcement praised his innovative approach to cross-border finance and impeccable ethical standards, phrases that made bile rise in Nora's throat. Accompanying the text was a photo from the announcement party, Sebastian looking smugly triumphant, his arm around a beaming Madeline. They'd edited her out of the narrative completely, rewriting history so that her downfall became their ascension. Not good news, I think, Damien said quietly, setting a fresh espresso beside her laptop. Nora closed the screen. Just ghosts. He studied her face. Ghosts that still have power. Only if I give it to them, she replied, reaching for his hand. The casual intimacy they shared still surprised her. How easily they touched, how naturally their bodies sought connection, even in public spaces. That evening, as Damien prepared dinner in her small kitchen, cooking, she'd discovered, was another skill he'd perfected during his former life, where safe food preparation could be a security matter. Nora found herself watching him with sudden clarity. The easy domesticity they'd fallen into over recent weeks struck her as both wonderful and precarious. "What are we doing, Damien?" she asked, the question emerging unbidden. He glanced up from the fish he was preparing, his hands pausing momentarily. "Right now, I'm making lubina a la sal, and you're having an existential moment." Despite her mood, she smiled. His ability to disarm her most serious moments without dismissing them was uniquely comforting. "I mean this," she clarified, gesturing between them. "Us. Is this just a beautiful interlude? Two damaged people finding temporary comfort?" Damien wiped his hands and came around the counter, standing before her without touching. "Is that what you want it to be?" The directness of his gaze made evasion impossible. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted. Before, everything was mapped out. Next promotion, next achievement, next rung on the ladder. Now I'm... She searched for the word, untethered. He nodded, understanding passing across his features. "Freedom can feel like falling when you're used to walls." "Exactly." Relief flooded her at being understood without lengthy explanation. "And whatever this is between us, it doesn't fit any category I recognize." Damien took her hands, his touch grounding. "Perhaps that's precisely why it matters. It exists outside the structures you've used to define yourself. But is it real?" She pressed. "Or just a beautiful dream we're sharing before reality intrudes?" Instead of answering, he guided her hand to his chest, placing her palm over his heart. The steady rhythm pulsed against her skin. "This is real," he said simply. "What happens next, we decide together. No predefined path, no external validation required." The simplicity of his answer calmed the chaos in her mind. This man operated from a core of certainty she was only beginning to rediscover in herself, not the false confidence of her professional mask, but something authentic and hard-won. She closed the distance between them, pressing her body against his. "Take me to bed," she whispered against his mouth. "Dinner can wait." Later, sated and wrapped in tangled sheets, they ate the salvaged fish with their fingers, laughing at the impromptu picnic on her bed. The anxiety that had gripped her earlier receded, replaced by a sensation she was finally allowing herself to name, happiness simple and unqualified. The text message arrived the following Thursday, shattering their newfound equilibrium. "I know where you're hiding, Nora. The board wants to talk. Privately. Your silence for complete exoneration. Sight." She stared at the screen, her breath shallow, the blood draining from her face. Sebastian had found her. "What is it?" Damien asked, emerging from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, hair still damp from their shower. "Nothing," she said automatically, the old habit of handling crises alone reasserting itself. She set the phone down, screen darkened. Damien didn't push, but she felt his attention sharpen, the security professional evaluating a potential threat. They finished dressing in strained silence, the easy intimacy of moments before replaced by the wall she'd unconsciously erected. At the door, he paused. "I have deliveries this morning." "Will you be at the cafe later?" "I might work here today," she replied, avoiding his eyes. "Some emails to catch up on." He nodded, accepting her withdrawal without comment. "If you need anything, I know where to find you," she finished, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. After he left, Nora paced the small cottage, the text message pulsing in her mind like a dangerous beacon. How had Sebastian tracked her here? What did complete exoneration mean? Most importantly, what was she going to do? The instinct to run reasserted itself, the same impulse that had brought her to this Spanish village 3 months ago. She could disappear again, Find another anonymous corner of the world, start over. Again. But something had changed. The woman who had fled New York in shame and anger was not the same woman who now stood in this sun-drenched cottage with the scent of Damien still on her skin. That woman had been running from, this woman would be running to. And what about Damien? The thought of leaving without explanation created a physical pain in her chest. In mere weeks, he had become essential to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Making a decision, she picked up her phone. "What exactly are you offering?" She typed. The response came within seconds, suggesting Sebastian had been waiting. "Full public statement clearing your name. Confirmation you had no knowledge of discrepancies. Return of your personal investment portfolio. All we need is your continued silence about certain client relationships." Nora considered. The offer was unexpectedly generous, which meant Sebastian must be desperate. The certain client relationships likely referred to the questionable Asian accounts she'd flagged before her departure, the same ones Sebastian had dismissed as cultural differences in banking practices. "Why now?" she asked. "Merger negotiations. Your signature on final declarations would remove potential complications." Translation, they were packaging the firm for acquisition and needed to eliminate any risk of her breaking silence. Sebastian's promotion suddenly made sense, positioning himself for maximum benefit when the merger completed. When and where? She typed, already formulating a plan. "I'm in Barcelona. Can come to you tomorrow." Name the place. The thought of Sebastian in her sanctuary made her physically ill. The Mandarin Oriental, Barcelona. Noon tomorrow. Lobby bar. Come alone. Looking forward to seeing you, Nora. I've missed our conversations. The innuendo made her skin crawl. She blocked the number, then sat heavily on her sofa, mind racing. Sebastian would never honor any agreement that didn't benefit him directly. Whatever documents they wanted her to sign would undoubtedly contain hidden traps, perhaps even admissions that could later be used against her. The knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Damien, his expression carefully neutral. "You forgot this," he said, holding out her sketchbook. She'd begun drawing again recently, something she hadn't done since college. Simple coastal scenes, abstract patterns, occasionally Damien's profile as he slept. "Thank you," she said, taking it without meeting his eyes. Instead of leaving, he remained on the threshold. "I won't ask what's wrong," he said quietly, "but I need you to know something. Whatever battles you're fighting, you don't have to fight them alone anymore." The simple declaration broke something inside her. Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back welled in her eyes. "He found me," she whispered, stepping back to let Damien enter. "Sebastian, he's in Barcelona." Damien's posture shifted subtly, shoulders straightening, gaze sharpening, the security professional emerging from beneath the cafe owner. "What does he want?" Nora showed him the text exchange. As Damien read, his expression remained neutral, but she noticed the slight tension in his jaw, the calculated steadiness of his breathing. "It's a trap," he said finally. "Of course it is." She smiled grimly. "But I'm going anyway." His eyes met hers. "Why?" "Because running didn't solve anything. Because I'm tired of letting him control the narrative of my life. Because I need to see his face when he realizes I'm not broken." Damien considered her words. "Then I'm coming with you." "No," she said firmly. "This is my battle, and I'm not suggesting I fight it for you," he countered. "But tactical support never hurts." The security terminology made her smile despite everything. "What did you have in mind exactly?" "Simple surveillance. I'll be nearby, unobtrusive. He won't know I exist unless something goes wrong." Nora wanted to refuse, to prove she could handle this alone. But the truth was, Sebastian's text had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Having Damien nearby, not intervening, just present, would give her the confidence to face her former fiancé with the composure she needed. "All right," she agreed, "but promise me you'll stay back unless I signal you." "Scout's honor," he said, raising 3 fingers in a salute that somehow managed to look both ridiculous and endearing on a man with his background. That night, as they lay together in her bed, their lovemaking took on a desperate edge, harder, faster, more demanding than their usual unhurried exploration. Nora rode him with almost punishing intensity, as if trying to physically expel the anxiety Sebastian's intrusion had created. Damien matched her pace, gripping her hips hard enough to leave marks, watching her face as she chased oblivion. When she faltered, overwhelmed by competing emotions, he flipped their positions, pinning her beneath him. Stay with me, he commanded softly, slowing his movements to deep, deliberate thrusts that forced her to focus solely on sensation. Right here, right now. Nothing else exists. He maintained this exquisite torture until she was pleading, her body trembling on the edge of release, but unable to cross over. Please, she gasped, straining against his restraining hands. Tell me what you need, he whispered, his control evident in every measured movement. You, she breathed. Just you. Something in her tone, the raw honesty perhaps, broke his restraint. He released her wrists, gathering her against him as his rhythm intensified. When she came, it was with a sob that contained equal parts pleasure and emotional release. He followed immediately, his body shuddering against hers, her name a reverent whisper against her throat. Afterward, he held her as silent tears soaked his chest, not of sadness, but of emotional unburdening. No words were needed. Their bodies had already communicated everything essential. The Mandarin Oriental's lobby glittered with understated luxury, precisely the environment Sebastian navigated with such practiced ease. Nora arrived early, selecting a corner table that afforded clear sight lines to all entrances while allowing her back to remain against a wall. The tactical positioning was Damien's suggestion, delivered that morning as they'd driven from her village to Barcelona. She wore a simple linen dress in pale blue, nothing like the power suits of her former life, with her hair loose around her shoulders and minimal makeup. The deliberate casualness was its own kind of armor. She would not perform the role Sebastian would be expecting. He arrived precisely at noon, predictably punctual when it served his purposes. 3 months had changed nothing about him. The same expertly tailored suit, the same artfully tousled dark hair, the same confident stride that parted the crowd without effort. She watched him scan the lobby, noting how his expression shifted when he spotted her, first surprise at her transformed appearance, then the practiced smile he deployed for negotiations. Nora, he said, approaching her table. You look relaxed. The barely concealed condescension triggered a flicker of her old insecurity, swiftly replaced by calm certainty. This man held no power over her anymore. Sebastian, she replied, not rising to accept the kiss he leaned in to offer. Shall we order? I have plans this afternoon. His smile tightened as he took the seat across from her. Up close, she noticed things she'd missed at first glance. New lines around his eyes, a tightness in his jaw suggesting stress despite his recent successes. Of course. I've taken the liberty of having the documents sent up to a suite, more private for our discussion. We'll talk here, she said firmly. Sebastian signaled a waiter, ordering scotch for himself and without consulting her, a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, her former drink of choice. Still not trusting me, I see. Trust is earned, not assumed. She canceled the wine order when the waiter arrived, requesting sparkling water instead. Let's see these documents. Sebastian withdrew a thin leather portfolio from his briefcase, sliding it across the table. Everything straightforward. A mutual non-disparagement agreement, confirmation of settlement terms, and an acknowledgement that you had no direct knowledge of certain client transactions. Nora opened the portfolio, scanning the legal language with the practiced eye of someone who had reviewed countless contracts. As expected, buried within the boilerplate were carefully constructed clauses that would effectively prevent her from ever working in finance again, while giving Prescott Capital the right to correct the record should any information about their practices emerge from any source. This isn't exoneration, she said, closing the portfolio. It's a more sophisticated gag order. Sebastian leaned forward, voice lowered. It's the best you're going to get, Nora. The board was prepared to pursue criminal charges before I intervened. Criminal charges for what, exactly? I didn't steal anything. No. But your oversight failures created an environment where others could. His implication was clear. He could still frame her as complicit. Others, like you, she stated flatly. His smile never wavered. Water under the bridge. We both made mistakes. The question is whether you want to move forward or remain stuck in the past. Nora studied the man she'd once planned to marry, seeing clearly the emptiness behind his practiced charm. How had she ever found him compelling? I'm curious, she said, leaning back in her chair. Did you love me at all, or was I just conveniently placed for your ambitions? The question seemed to genuinely surprise him. Of course I cared for you, Nora. We were good together. Complementary skills, aligned goals. We made sense. That's not what I asked. Sebastian sighed, impatience flickering across his features. What does it matter now? We've both moved on. I'm offering you a clean slate. No, she said, pushing the portfolio back toward him. You're offering me a different kind of cage. His expression hardened. Don't be dramatic. This deal disappears when I leave Barcelona. Then it disappears. She stood, gathering her small handbag. I don't need your permission to reclaim my life, Sebastian. He grabbed her wrist as she turned to leave, his fingers digging into her skin. You're making a serious mistake. Do you think anyone's going to hire you after Prescott? Your reputation is in tatters. Let go of me, she said quietly, acutely aware of their public surroundings. The Nora Jensen I knew was smarter than this, he hissed. What happened to your strategic thinking, your pragmatism? She met someone who valued her humanity above her utility, she replied, pulling her arm free. Goodbye, Sebastian. She walked away, her heart pounding but her step steady. She felt rather than saw Damien rise from his position at the bar, maintaining distance but clearly tracking her movement toward the exit. This isn't over, Nora. Sebastian called after her, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. We know about your Spanish boyfriend too, the ex-military contractor with the questionable record in the Middle East. How long before his past catches up with both of you? The threat froze her momentarily. They'd investigated Damien. The realization sent ice through her veins, but she forced herself to keep walking, not giving Sebastian the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. Outside, the Barcelona sunshine felt incongruously bright after the darkness of Sebastian's threats. She moved quickly down the boulevard, only stopping when she reached the prearranged meeting point 2 blocks away. Damien appeared moments later, his expression concerned but controlled. He threatened you, she said without preamble. They've been investigating you. Damien nodded, unsurprised. I expected as much. Men like him don't accept rejection without retaliation. This is my fault, she began. I've dragged you into... No, he interrupted firmly. My past is my own responsibility. I have nothing to hide from you, though there are operations that remain classified. Nora studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. There's nothing they could use against you. Nothing that would stick. His smile held grim humor. Nothing that wouldn't implicate several governments and intelligence agencies in the process. Sebastian is bluffing, throwing whatever he can to unsettle you. Relief flooded her, followed immediately by a surge of anger. He won't stop, will he? Not immediately, Damien acknowledged. Men who build their identity on power and control rarely surrender easily. They walked in silence toward the parking garage where they'd left their car. Nora's mind raced with implications and potential countermoves. The strategist in her, the part of herself she'd temporarily abandoned during her retreat to Spain, reawakened with surprising clarity. I need to go back to New York, she said suddenly. Damien stopped walking. When? Soon. A week, maybe 2. She turned to face him. Sebastian's right about one thing. Running hasn't solved anything. If I want my life back, on my terms, I need to face this directly. What will you do there? I still have contacts, people who know the truth. The non-disclosure agreement prevents me from speaking publicly, but others can. And if Prescott is preparing for a merger, there will be due diligence that could expose what Sebastian has been hiding. Damien absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. And after? The question contained layers. After New York, after resolving the Prescott situation, after everything that had brought her to Spain in the first place. Nora realized with sudden clarity that she was planning a future again, something she hadn't done since the night she found Sebastian and Madeline together. After depends partly on you, she said carefully. On what you want, what I want. He seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. Yes, this started as, whatever it was, comfort, connection, healing. But if I go back to New York, if I reclaim some version of my former life, where does that leave us? Understanding dawned in his eyes. You think I only want the version of you who washed up on my beach, broken and retreating from the world? The possibility has occurred to me, she admitted. You left your former life because you wanted simplicity, authenticity. My world is anything but simple. Damien stepped closer, framing her face with his hands. Nora, I fell for you, not your circumstances. The woman who swims at dawn and sketches sunsets is the same woman who can dismantle financial empires. I want all of you, not just the parts that fit some idealized retreat from complexity. Even if that means leaving Spain, your cafe, the life you've built here? His smile held absolute certainty. The cafe was never meant to be permanent. Just a way station while I figured out what comes next. Maybe what comes next is us, wherever that takes us. The simplicity of his declaration stunned her. In her former world, relationships were strategic alliances, carefully negotiated arrangements of mutual benefit. Damien offered something radically different, Partnership without agenda. Love without conditions. I need you to be sure, she whispered. My life is about to get complicated again. I spent 15 years in conflict zones, he reminded her, humor dancing in his eyes. I think I can handle Wall Street. She kissed him then, in the middle of the bustling Barcelona street, pouring into the contact everything she wasn't yet ready to name aloud. His arms wrapped around her, solid and secure, anchoring her against the uncertainty that lay ahead. When they separated, both slightly breathless, Nora felt a clarity she'd been missing for months. Sebastian's reappearance hadn't broken her newfound peace, it had crystallized what truly mattered. She was done allowing others to define her worth or dictate her choices. Take me home, she said, lacing her fingers through Damien's. We have plans to make. As they drove back along the coastal road, the Mediterranean stretching endlessly beside them, Nora watched Damien's profile against the golden late afternoon light. 3 months ago, she'd arrived in Spain seeking escape, believing her life had imploded beyond recovery. Now she understood that what had shattered wasn't her life, but the artificial constraints she'd built around it. In losing everything, she'd created space to find something authentic, not just with Damien, but within herself. Whatever challenges lay ahead in New York or beyond, she would face them not as the carefully constructed financial prodigy or the wounded victime in retreat, but as this new version of herself, integrated, resilient, and finally genuinely visible. The cottage appeared around the bend, its stone walls glowing amber in the setting sun. Tonight, they would plan their return to New York, strategizing their approach to the Prescott situation. Tomorrow would bring complications and decisions. But for now, there was this moment, a man who saw her completely, a place that had sheltered her transformation, and a future opening before them, unscripted but profoundly real. My lovely viewers and family, just in case you haven't located the subscribe button, please do well to do so. Subscribe, like and share this beautiful story with your friends. I'll see you at the other side of the story. 3 weeks later, Nora stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her attorney's Manhattan office, watching snowflakes swirl against the gray December sky. The city sprawled before her, a landscape she had once commanded but now viewed with detached appreciation, beautiful in its way, but no longer the center of her universe. It's done, Martin Goldstein announced, setting a folder on the conference table. At 65, with silver hair and the posture of a career litigator, he'd been Nora's trusted counsel for nearly a decade. The SEC has accepted our documentation. Prescott's board has approved the revised separation agreement. You're officially exonerated. Nora turned from the window. And Sebastian? Martin's smile held grim satisfaction. Currently answering some very uncomfortable questions about those Asian accounts. The merger due diligence team found discrepancies that couldn't be explained away. Your anonymous tips to the right people proved illuminating. And Madeline? Terminated last week. Apparently loyalty only extends so far when millions are at stake. He studied her face. You don't seem as pleased as I expected. Nora considered this. 6 months ago, such vindication would have been everything. The restoration of her professional reputation, the downfall of those who'd betrayed her. Now it felt like closing a chapter rather than reclaiming a life. I'm pleased, she said carefully, just not defined by it anymore. Her phone vibrated with a text message. Damien, meeting finished. Waiting downstairs. Good news? She smiled, typing quickly. The best. Be right down. Your security consultant? Martin asked, having observed the change in her expression. Among other things, she replied, gathering her coat and briefcase. Martin had been skeptical when she'd returned to New York with Damien in tow, introducing him as both personal and professional support. The attorney had discreetly run his own background check, finding enough classified operations to raise eyebrows but nothing that undermined Damien's credentials. He's been good for you, Martin observed, walking her to the elevator. I haven't seen you this centered since, well, possibly ever. He sees me, Nora said simply, not what I can do for him or what I represent. Just me. In the lobby, Damien waited near the security desk, his powerful frame clothed in a charcoal suit that he wore with the same easy confidence he displayed in swim trunks on the Spanish coast. He'd adapted to New York with surprising ease, leveraging old security contacts to establish a temporary consulting arrangement while they determined their next steps. Their eyes met across the marble expanse, and Nora felt the now familiar flutter in her chest, desire mingled with something deeper, more substantial. Not the manufactured connection she'd forced with Sebastian, but something organic that had grown between them despite unlikely circumstances. Successful, he asked as she approached. Completely. She kissed him lightly, still adjusting to public displays of affection after years of careful professional distance. Sebastian's career is effectively over, though he doesn't know it yet. And how does that feel? The question, typical of Damien's emotional directness, made her pause as they stepped into the cold Manhattan afternoon. Less important than I thought it would, she admitted, as they walked toward Madison Avenue. Justice matters, but revenge turns out to be overrated. He smiled, taking her hand. Growth looks good on you, Nora Jensen. They made their way through the pre-Christmas crowds, past elaborately decorated storefronts and tourists photographing the giant ornaments on 6th Avenue. In just 3 weeks, they'd established new rhythms in this environment so different from the Spanish Village. Breakfast at the corner bakery, near her Gramercy Park apartment, evening walks regardless of weather, late nights where they mapped out possibilities for their shared future. New York had initially felt overwhelming to Nora after months of coastal simplicity, but Damien's steady presence helped her filter the chaos. She rediscovered the city's energy without surrendering to its demands, maintaining boundaries she'd never managed during her ascent at Prescott. Dinner reservations at 8, Damien reminded her as they turned toward her apartment. That gives us just enough time. Time for what? She asked, though the heat in his gaze answered her question. Inside her apartment, they didn't make it past the entryway before his mouth was on hers, hungry and intent. Their physical connection had only intensified since returning to New York, as if the contrast between public persona and private intimacy heightened both. 3 hours in that conference room, he murmured against her throat, hands already working the buttons of her blouse, watching you dismantle Sebastian's future while he remained completely unaware. Your brilliance is arousing. She laughed, the sound transforming into a moan as his teeth grazed her collarbone. Financial strategy as foreplay? That's new. Not the strategy, he corrected, backing her against the wall as her blouse fell open. The justice, the reclamation. His hand slid beneath her skirt, finding her already wet through thin silk. The woman who refuses to be diminished. Their coupling was urgent, almost desperate. Clothes pushed aside rather than removed, her leg hooked around his waist as he entered her with a single deep thrust that made her cry out. The intensity between them had evolved its own language, sometimes tender and exploratory, other times raw and demanding like this, but always with a core of genuine connection that made even their most primal encounters feel like communication rather than mere release. Look at me, he commanded as she approached her peak, echoing words from their first time together. When she opened her eyes, meeting his gaze as pleasure crashed through her, Nora felt the same transcendent vulnerability, the exquisite surrender of being truly seen in her most unguarded moment. Later, properly showered and dressed for dinner, they sat in a quiet corner of Gramercy Tavern, celebrating her legal victory with champagne and intimacy that required no physical contact. I had 3 offers today, she said, twirling the stem of her glass. 2 hedge funds and a private equity firm, very generous compensation packages. Damien nodded, unsurprised. Word of her exoneration had spread quickly through financial circles, triggering immediate recruitment attempts. And what did you tell them? That I'm considering my options. She met his eyes. Which is true, but not in the way they imagine. Tell me, he encouraged, leaning forward. I don't want to go back to what I was doing, she admitted. The hours, the constant pressure, the endless competition, it served its purpose in proving something I no longer need to prove. What do you want instead? The question hung between them, freighted with possibility. 3 months ago she couldn't have answered it. Now clarity had emerged from the ashes of her former life. I want to use what I know to help others avoid what happened to me, she said. Not as a consultant or corporate officer, but as an educator. NYU has approached me about developing a financial ethics curriculum based on real-world case studies. Professor Jensen, Damien tested the title, smiling. It suits you. It would mean a significant lifestyle adjustment, she cautioned. Lower compensation, different social circles. Are you trying to give me an exit opportunity? He asked, humor dancing in his eyes. Worried the security operative won't adapt to academic life? She laughed, the sound drawing glances from nearby tables. I'm serious, Damien. This isn't what you signed up for when we left Spain. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I signed up for you, Nora, not your job title or bank account. And what about you? Security consulting in New York was only meant to be temporary. Damien's expression grew thoughtful. I've had an interesting conversation with an old colleague. The UN has a program training security forces in conflict prevention rather than just response. They need someone with field experience who can translate tactical knowledge into practical ethics. Teaching, she observed. Like me. A different classroom, but yes. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture now familiar and grounding. It would mean regular travel to troubled regions, but New York would remain our base. Our base, she repeated, the casual plural settling something within her. Are we really doing this? Creating a life together? The question contained all her remaining doubts about the speed of their connection, the dramatic circumstances of their meeting, the sustainability of something born in extraordinary conditions. Damien reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Before she could process what was happening, he placed it on the table between them. I've been carrying this for a week, he said quietly. Waiting for the right moment, Nora stared at the box, her heart pounding. Damien. I'm not proposing, he clarified quickly. Not yet. That would be premature even for us. Relief mingled with unexpected disappointment as she tentatively opened the box. Inside lay not a ring, but a key attached to a silver compass rose. What is this? She asked, lifting it carefully. Options, he replied. I found a property on the Costa Brava, not far from where we met, but more substantial than your cottage. Close enough to Barcelona for travel connections, remote enough for peace. You bought a house in Spain? She asked, astonished. I made an offer, contingent on your approval. His expression remained calm, but she noticed tension in the set of his shoulders. It could be a weekend retreat, a summer home, or, she prompted when he hesitated, or our primary residence eventually. If New York becomes too confining, if teaching fulfills its purpose, if we decide simplicity matters more than proximity, Nora turned the key in her fingers, understanding dawning. You're giving me an anchor point, a constant in whatever future unfolds. He nodded. And the compass is to remind us both, that direction matters more than destination. The gesture embodied everything that distinguished Damien from anyone she'd known before. His ability to provide security without constraint, to plan without controlling, to love without diminishing her agency. He wasn't asking for commitment, but offering continuity regardless of how their paths evolved. Ask me, she said suddenly, her voice steady despite the emotion constricting her chest. Confusion flickered across his features. Ask you what? The question you're not asking because you think it's too soon. Understanding transformed his expression. Without hesitation, he reached across the table, taking both her hands in his. Nora Jensen, will you marry me? Not immediately, not on anyone's timeline but ours, but eventually, intentionally, with full awareness of what we're choosing. The question contained no pressure, no expectation, just an invitation to claim what they had already begun building together. Yes, she said simply, the certainty in her voice surprising even herself. Yes, I will. Later that night, as Manhattan's lights glittered beyond her bedroom windows, Nora lay in Damien's arms, her body still humming from his attentions. Their lovemaking had carried a new quality, a deliberate thoroughness, as if sealing their commitment through physical devotion. Tell me about the house, she murmured, tracing the scar that ran across his collarbone. Stone, like your cottage but larger. 3 bedrooms, a studio space that catches northern light for your painting, a terrace overlooking the water. His fingers drew lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. The previous owner was an author who valued privacy and beauty equally. It sounds perfect, she said, imagining them there, coffee on the terrace, swimming in the cove, evenings mapping out the next phases of their unexpected life together. We can visit after the new year, make changes if needed. His voice rumbled against her ear where it rested on his chest. Nothing is set in stone. Except us, she said with quiet certainty. Except us, he agreed, tightening his arm around her. As sleep approached, Nora reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, finding Sebastian and Madeline together had seemed like the end of everything. Now she recognized it as the catalyst that had forced her to dismantle a life built on external validation and rebuild something authentic in its place. The betrayal that shattered her carefully constructed world had created space for something genuine to take root, not just her relationship with Damien, but a renewed relationship with herself, one based on intrinsic worth rather than achievement or appearance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, curriculum development for her university position, negotiations for Damien's UN role, decisions about which possessions to keep and which to release as they crafted this dual-continent life together. But for now, there was only this, the steady rhythm of his heart beneath her cheek, the security of arms that protected. without confining, and the certainty that whatever paths opened before them, they would navigate them as true partners, seeing each other completely. In losing everything, Nora Jensen had found the one thing that mattered most, a love born of authentic connection rather than strategic advantage. A beginning that promised not perfection, but genuine partnership. A future undefined but brimming with possibility. My incredible viewers and family, this is just the beginning of Nora and Damien's extraordinary journey. Can you believe what fate has in store for them next? The passionate connection they've built is about to transform their lives in ways neither could have imagined. In part 2, we'll jump 18 months forward to discover that their Spanish coastal home isn't just filled with love, but with the joyful chaos of triplets. Yes, you heard that right. Nora's unexpected pregnancy rocks their world, bringing 3 beautiful babies who will test everything they thought they knew about commitment, sacrifice, and true partnership. But as Nora adjusts to motherhood and Damien embraces fatherhood, Sebastian resurfaces with shocking information that threatens their peaceful new life. Will their bond withstand this final attempt to destroy what they've built? And what happens when Damien's dangerous past catches up with them, putting not just their relationship but their entire family at risk? If you thought their love story was intense before, wait until you see how far they'll go to protect their newfound family. Drop a triplets in the comments if you can't wait for part 2, and hit subscribe now to make sure you don't miss this emotional roller coaster when it drops. Thank you.